with that, we start with our first session and our first conversation on stage. So for that, we have our moderator for the first keynote presentation and Q&A that is like truly remarkable tech writer, moderator. He has been writing for Techcrunch, for Crunch Gear, and lately he's been like one of the key figures in the crypto space. So he's writing for CoinDesk. He's written more than 5 books. So he truly needs no introduction because he is one of the best-known writers and a second-time Techsylvania visitor. So we're very glad to have him back. So please welcome John Biggs, who's going to moderate this first conversation. Thank you very much, John, for coming.
Okay, I'm John Biggs.
And I'm Jan.
Jan is approximately the same name, right? Are we both
yes,
the same guy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
so you're
I'm not sure about that.
No, we're not the same guy at all. I just got off a plane about an hour ago, so I don't know anything about anything. So why don't you tell me about Databricks? Databricks is your company, 800 people, built out of basically an idea, right, out of Berkeley.
Yeah, so Databricks is built around an open source software, Apache Spark, we developed at Berkeley. Starting in 2009, 2010, we started the project. And in time, it became very successful in the space of large data analytics and machine learning. And as more companies actually adopted it, it was a natural need to have a company behind it. If an enterprise uses an open source software, typically they want to know that it has viability longer term, and this means to have some more real company with resources behind it. So I created Databricks. We started Databricks, started with my students in 2013. And what we did, we provided a platform, a product on top of the open source. We targeted data scientists and data engineers, enabling them to, idea was to process large amount of data better and easier than ever before. And we focus on building a business in the cloud. So our product was, again, around the Apache Spark, but obviously we have security, manageability, and a set of tools which make it easier for people to develop and to analyze big amount of data.
Okay. So I think the most interesting thing that we can talk about is building an open source product and selling an open source product. To a lot of these folks, an open source product is kind of a dead end, right? You give it away and then you don't get anything out of it. How did you guys do that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So when we started, actually, people kind of pushed back because in 2013, there is only one big, successful open source company that was Red Hat. And at that time, also, there was this kind of smaller company around the Hadoop ecosystem. It was Hortonworks and Cloudera. But they were only a few years old startups, so it wasn't very clear, you know, even at that point, although there was a lot of excitement about how successful they are going to be. So we saw it quite a bit, and actually that was one of the reasons we chose cloud. And here it's one, one example. The cloud may be a better way to go for a business based on open source, and actually it was already proven in some sense indirectly by Amazon. Amazon built a lot of original business in Amazon Web Services, AWS, based on the open source. Of course, they have also the infrastructure. But here is the thing, like if you have an open source and the open source is delivered on-premise, on the private cloud of an enterprise. So the way the people from the enterprise, or these IT people from enterprise look at, is basically say, well, I can download this open source, and it's for free, or I can pay this company to manage it for it. So it's kind of, it's in their mind, which is also is not really true, it's a difference between I pay $0 to download or I pay $1. If you do it in the cloud, the dynamics changes a little bit. in the sense that if I'm running something in the cloud, I already pay the cloud. So now the question is between paying $1 for the cloud or $2 for the cloud and this kind of software which is running on top of the cloud. And going from 1 to 2 is much easier than going from 0 to 1.
Okay, what kind of businesses work best for this sort of cloud-based solution? It sounds like a data mining, machine learning product is probably one of the better ideas. What else have you seen out there that somebody could use?
Yeah. I think that's working very well. It's again, you need to build your product in such a way so you can take advantage of the public cloud. Of course, people, they go to the public cloud. One of the reasons is because elasticity, and they pay as you go, right? You pay only for what you use, and if you suddenly use a lot of more resources because you have a spike in your workload, you are just going to get more machines, maybe in a few tens of minutes, maybe hours, right? It used to be. Now it's even faster. This is very different from when you are running your business on-prem, and if you want to expand from 10 servers to 100 servers, it will take you a few months, right? It's like you need to figure out what you are going to order, you need to see which vendor you are going to pick, and then you need to put the order in, you need to get the machine, you need to install them, and so forth. So that's what they use. It's very important to keep in mind. And now the reason I'm saying that is because when you look at same thing like big data processing or even machine learning, which is also machine learning, a big part of its success because it operates on a very large amount of data, you want to decouple the storage from the computation. That's where the cloud shines, because you keep the data and in the storage in the cloud, and that is cheap still, it's in relative terms. And then you pay only when you compute on it. If your system doesn't decouple the storage from the computation, so they are coupled in the sense that nodes who store the data also do the computation, you have to reserve these instances and pay even when you don't do anything, because you need to pay for the data which is stored on this machine. So that's why you see right now is like more and more services, actually, so it's happening for the past 5 years, are this kind of decoupling the storage. The data is in the storage, like S3 or the blob store in Microsoft Azure. S3 is in AWS, and the compute.
Okay, so you're good on the geeky stuff. Let's talk a little bit about raising cash. So a lot of these folks who might be here are thinking about getting big funding rounds. You raised $500 million. When did you raise $500 million, and why? Why did they give you that money?
I see. So it depends, again, it depends on the round. Initially, the seed and even Series A, it's about a story. It's about a story the investors are going to get excited and believe in it, and I'm going back to that. As you are going to progress, it's about, the numbers in terms of the revenue and so forth are going to matter more and more. And in the later rounds, you are going to have this kind of funny multiplier, which basically the investors say, you make 10 million revenue, this is in a high growth business, and then I can see you scaling, so I'm going to offer you a 20x multiplier, so the valuation will be 200 millions. So it's, if they perceive as a business, it's not going to scale, or it's harder to scale. Like, for instance, if you do some services, right? Professional services is a big part of your revenue. People are more nervous to give you a higher multiplier because professional service is harder to scale, because that's about hiring more people, and good people. And that's just harder. So you'll give you a lower multiplier, so maybe 5x, which is 50 million. So that's basically in the later rounds. It's more logical, it's how it looks like. Now, the first round, as I said, is about the story. So what investors want is, like, obviously you want to see there is a chance, good chance, they still know that most of the companies will fail, most of the startup fails, that you are going to hit big, right? It's going to be a big thing. The one thing I want to make sure to say here is that at least some investors, and I think there is a logic behind that, we had, by the way, our investors were main investor, even to this day, it's A16Z, which is Anderson and Horowitz, and NEA, and from A16Z we have on board Ben Horowitz. So one thing people, one mistake some people make, at least for some investors, I see that as a mistake, is that basically saying, wow, is this $10 billion market, I'm going to get 1%, and this from this $10 billion market is whatever. And that will still make a huge company. It's a big company, right? The problem is that logic is that, like many will tell you, is like if you look in, especially if you look in the software, and when you are going to companies consolidate, well, when the market consolidates, you really have one big winner in most of the cases, maybe two. But typically the pattern is have one huge big winner, the 800-pound gorilla, that makes money, and then you have a second one which kind of break even, and everyone else loses money. I'm oversimplifying it. So that's not maybe a good model. A better model in some sense is basically to say in some cases that you are going to bet maybe on a niche, and that niche is you have a chance to dominate, and the investor believes that that niche is going to grow very fast. So that gives you a better chance. Also, the other problem with the first one is that we say, well, I'm going to take 1% of this establishing market, is that that market is large because there are some large companies in there. So you have to deal with the incumbents, which is a little bit more difficult to deal with. While if it's a niche, if the niche is reasonably small, then it's much easier for incumbents may not take a look at it. And if you look at the biggest companies which are created, actually, they use this kind of recipe, or they use implicitly or explicitly. If you look at Microsoft, whoever, if reads the history, Microsoft was kind of starting with building compilers and then the operating system for personal computers. IBM didn't, ignore that. They all their money, they're coming from mainframes. Actually, if you look at Google again, it's like search. Who was doing search? There are a few companies like Alta Vista and so forth. No, none of the big companies are doing search. When they tried to do it, it was too late, right? Almost in each of these cases, when the incumbents actually realized the potential of that niche was growing so fast, it was too late for them. And another example, Facebook, social network. Who was doing social networks then? It was MySpace, right? It's like music. That's no one else was doing. And they started that, become huge, and they continue their dominance. And when the other people try to go, it's like in the social networks like Google, they are not as successful. So that's what you need to think pretty hard about what is your story and why you are going to, to build a solid enterprise.
So this is an interesting question. Why didn't you guys fail? Most startups fail. What was it about your geography, about your background, about your employees, about your idea?
Yeah.
What let you survive?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, it's like, so many things they have to go right. It's this quote from Tolstoy, from Anna Karenina. It's basically saying, all the happy families are happy the same way, or all the unhappy families are unhappy in their own way, which basically means that there are many things which can make you unhappy, and you need all of this to be right, to be happy, right? So, just in order, it's like, obviously, in all of these cases, you need the product market fit, right? You need to get to the point in which you know exactly who are your customers and what's the value you provide to the customers, and that they are going to sell and pay you for your product, and then you are going to scale. So for us, it was a little bit easier because we had the open source. So the open source gives you that advantage because you already know the value it provides for some, for some users. In our case, again, our main users are data scientists and data engineers. So that's one. You have to get that right. But one of the most important things, and actually, many investors will tell you they look at, is a team, right? They have experience. I'm trusting the team because maybe the technology is risky. Maybe there are many things can happen wrong. But it's a good, strong team. They can navigate that. They can navigate raw waters, rough waters, and and maybe they pivot like Slack, right? It's like Slack is very popular now. It didn't start like that. They are doing gaming. So that's about the team. And I think we have a very strong team. Quite a few people also with some experience in previous startups and some, super smart graduate students. So which we worked together for a long time. Right? So you had trust, right? With a team, it's not only how good are people, but how do they trust each other, right? So that's the second one. The third one was you need a little bit of luck, right? But obviously, everyone will have luck at some times in her or his life. The question is to exploit that luck. And in that case, the luck for us was that when we started, obviously the way people are processing the data was using Hadoop. And it was very popular, everyone talking about Hadoop, everyone being excited about. Spark was addressing some of the most biggest problems of Hadoop in terms of the ease of development of application, and more importantly about the speed was 10 or 100x faster than Hadoop because it was a better, newer technology. But Hadoop, the problem with Hadoop was that the community was kind of fractured because there were two companies around Hadoop. The Hadoop was developed at Yahoo, and it was this other company, Cloudera, started earlier. And then Hortonworks started from Yahoo. And it was a little bit of infighting in the open source. This slows them down. And this allows us, makes things easier for us to dominate that kind of use case of big data processing. So I think these are the things. You need a team of people you are going to trust, working well together. If you have some of you have some experience with some other startup, that's a plus. You need to reach the product market fit as fast as possible. And you need, like always, you need a little bit of luck. And then it's again packaging. You need to have good stories, and then once you get the product market fit, you just push the pedal to the metal, and you are going to scale. The speed is fundamental.
Could you have built it from Bucharest? Could you build it from Romania? Could you build it from here?
I think certainly you can do. There are things, probably some things are easier, some things are harder, right? And there are successes like UiPath coming from Romania. So I think that probably what will be easier is getting it's easier to hire bright people in probably here, because in Silicon Valley, it's a huge competition for talent, and you are going to compete there with Facebook and Google and so forth, which give huge packages, or Uber or whatever. So that's one. I think on though you have in Silicon Valley, you have a superb infrastructure in terms of the investment, in terms of financial investment, in terms of the network. Of other people can help you because they have such experience, and there are so many startups. So that's kind of, I would say, it will be the balance. But definitely, as other people have shown, you can definitely build such a business in Bucharest or Cluj.
What do you wish you had known when you were first starting out that you know now?
What I wished. I think that one thing I wished, and it's always hard to, although I knew a little bit, but I tried to do it, but I think you can do it even better, is focus. It's very hard to focus, especially when you are going to think you have many opportunities, or even if you don't have opportunities, it's, even then maybe you say, oh, I'm trying this and this and this. So I think that, trying to focus, maybe make a fast experiment. If you fail, you focus on the next thing. It's extremely important. And I wish, if I go back, I wish I would have done even probably better. We did focus on the cloud. We didn't go on this on-prem on the company, which I think was a great decision in the retrospect, because it's just the development, the speed of development, the ease of development of the product in the cloud is so much easier than on-prem. But then it comes to, you are going to decide, I'm going to do this new feature, I'm going to build this new product. And it's very hard to say no, especially when you have lots of money. And you think that you are going to increase the revenue. But in some cases, things come to bite you. Because the way to think about, I've seen this great, statistics. People always think, especially smart people, say, well, I can do this in 6 months, right? It's like I build this new feature. And so what's wrong, and I can do better than anything else on the market, typically. But the one way to think and in your mind and helps you to focus is the fact that if you look at on the entire lifetime of a product or of a big feature, the time you put for the MVP, for the releasing first feature to your customers, it's only 10% of the resources you have to spend on that feature over its entire lifetime or product, to maintain it, to fix bugs, maybe to add new feature, to improve it. So once you decide, it's a long-term commitment. It's not like you build 6 months and you can move on. It's not. That's the decision you have to make, right? It's like, just think about your engineers will tell you, well, I'm going to build this in 6 months, and typically they are optimistic, so multiply that by 2, and then multiply by another 10. So that's kind of the commitment you are going to make.
That's actually an interesting point about focus, because I'm sure these guys have 2 or 3 projects or 5 projects running at once. How do you decide which one to pick? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, they look at the wide world and they say, I want to do it all.
Yeah.
And doing one thing kind of like shuts down an entire universe of possibilities.
Yes. I will still argue that it's like you want to basically I think that it's the best to put yourself in that situation, say, I have 3 choices, but I have to choose one. Because this forces you to think carefully about which one you are going to choose. And it forces you about one other thing. It forces you to say how I am going to test this hypothesis as fast as possible. Because if it's not good, then I can go to the second one. I still need to have money when I go to the second one. And I think these 2 things, forcing you to think very hard about which one you are going to choose, and thinking very hard what is the fastest way to test, whether it gets traction, because this means that you need to talk with the customers and so forth, are very, very healthy. If you don't do that, you are going to work on all 3 of them, because why should I think very hard which is going to have traction? I'm going to do all of them, and I'll see.
What should people be thinking about right now? You got in early with data warehousing, machine learning, all that other good stuff. What's coming up on the horizon that people should be looking at?
I think clearly it's machine learning systems. I think this is no question about that. And machine learning actually, so far machine learning, when you read in the paper, you read about this kind of fancy human level tasks, right? What people are good at and machines are used to not be good at, like speech recognition, language translation, or playing games or things like that. And here, because with all this advancement in deep neural networks and reinforcement learning, people were able to match or exceed the human capabilities in this kind of task. But looking forward, I think that there'll be a lot of application, more and more application in more kind of systems or industrial or engineering tasks, like optimizing business processes or optimizing systems in general, and optimizing the supply chain. Just talking with some big customers who are saying, like, well, I want to make sure that when I order this item to put in my warehouse, I want to know exactly how much I need to order. If I order too much, then I'm going to pay money to storing them in the data warehouse. If I order too little, I'm going to run out of them. And there are so many other industries, all the industry, like financial industry, like healthcare, life sciences, which are ripe for this kind of disruption of having better tools for fundamentally doing prediction and optimizing whatever, the processes. And everywhere, like even in healthcare, you may not think you need to optimize, but there are so many things to optimize and to predict how to develop better drugs and so forth, better healthcare, precision medicine, and things like that, which you want to have customized treatment for every person. So that's all be it.
The idea of optimization is important, I think, but I think What's your answer to the folks who are going to say, okay, we've optimized the system for cancer screening in brain tumors. What happens to all those radiologists who are on call all day long looking at scans, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think happens in that situation?
Yeah, that's very good. I think that, look, I mean, no matter how you slice and dice it, the world will change, and it's changing. The world is changing in the sense that it used to be like 50 years ago or more, you are going to train for a particular profession, and that's your lifelong profession. That's no longer going to be true. Things are changing faster and faster, so you constantly need to train or retrain yourself. But in that particular case, this radiologist will be used for a long time, because even if you have, and particularly if you have a neural network, which basically is going to tell you, look at an X-ray and say, okay, there is an issue here, and the radiologist needs to provide the interpretation and eventually need to sign that document, basically saying, the report, right? So you are going to still, it's like a doctor, right? It's like, in order to give you a diagnosis, it's like, this can be, at least for a long time, there will be aiding these doctors, right, by providing suggestions and about what the diagnosis. And the doctor, in the end, can decide which one to pick, or maybe it's something else. So these things in which the tools are going to make the professions, better, it's like another way I heard someone saying is, and I think it's very visual, is basically saying like these tools will allow everyone to be expert in the field, right? Because it's going to learn from experts, and if you are not experts, you are from the beginning, it's going to give you advice and help you to become the expert.
Okay, I don't want to dork out too much on AI. That's one of my things that I'm interested in. What can these guys do right now? Some of them are in school, some of them are building startups. What can they do to get the world to notice them, to get to talk to Horowitz in Silicon Valley? Do they have to move to Silicon Valley? Can they hang out here?
I think, these events like this are great because you are going to have people from around the world coming here. Of course, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think this is what it's a networking, as a chance to pitch to these investors. So you need to have an environment to do that, and I think this is what it is. It's networking events, and it's a great start.
All right, so go to networking events, drink a lot of wine, hang out, talk about nerd stuff.
Yeah, and now you're colleagues, right? It's like, some will be more successful than the other, but if you are going to be colleagues, you are going to be friends, that network will be extremely important. You are going to learn from each other and so forth.
So an ecosystem and a community that they need. And you have that in Berkeley, right? You basically can point at anybody at Berkeley and say, come work at my startup.
Absolutely.
Interesting. All right, perfect. Let's give these guys a little extra 2 minutes. I think we're good. Thank you, Jan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.